Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom. Today, the 26th day of the month of Shabbat of the year 5777, corresponding to the 22nd of February of the year 2017. Today's studies will be Le'ilui Nishmat Rabbi Chaim Yosef ben Pinchas Dovid, a dear friend that passed away some years ago on this day, the 26th of Shvat, a dear friend and frequent correspondent and supporter of the work of Azamra, who I believe is having very great nachas today from watching the fruits of what he invested in while he could with very great assiduousness, and his investment in the Torah was continual, and Menuchato Eden, may his rest be in the Garden of Eden. So today we will be continuing with our studies of Iyov and our study of Mishnah tractate Shabbat. And without further ado, let us go to our study of the book of Job. Shalom. Today, the 26th of the month of Shvat of the year 5776. Let's do that again. I'm sorry I keep making this mistake because it's written wrongly right here in front of me. So let's start again, please. Shalom. Today, the 26th of Shvat of the year 5777, corresponding to the 22nd of February of the year 2017. And today is the yahrzeit of a dear friend, Alav HaShalom, peace be upon him, Rabbi Chaim Yosef ben Rabbi Pinchas Dovid, Menuchato Eden, may his rest be in Eden. And today's limud is Le'ilui Nishmato. And today we continue with our study of the book of Job with the chapter 8, which is now the answer of the second of the three companions to Job, following Job's answer to Eliphaz. We are in the first round of discourses, and each of the three companions addresses Job in turn. And now we come to the second, Bildad Shuhi, and we shall see that in some ways Bildad's answer to Job is reminiscent of that of Eliphaz. He adds some things. The question I think that we need to have in our minds as we read this chapter is to ask if you and I could possibly imagine ourselves being in Job's condition. Well, how would the answers of these companions feel to you? How do they feel to me if we were really in this incredibly difficult, suffering situation? And so with that, let us go into the text of chapter 8 as Bildad answers. Chapter 8, verse 1. Vaya'an Bildad Shuhi vayomar. And now Bildad the Shuhi, which as our commentators tell us is a descendant of the family of Shuach, who was one of the sons of Abraham by Keturah, and he answers... Vaya'an, he answers and he says, Ad on temalel eile, v'ruach kabir imrei ficho. Until when will you utter forth, say these things? And a powerful, mighty wind are the words of your mouth. He can hear his words in different ways. He is trying to dismiss what Job is saying. How long are you going to talk this way? And all this is a wind. But perhaps we can judge Bildad Shuhi in the scale of merit, that he's saying to Job in the way that sometimes one tries to distract the attention of a child that is obsessively complaining and moaning and groaning. That's enough. How long? How long will you do this? He's trying to just quieten him in order to give him some words of wisdom. In verse 3, Ha'il ya'avis mishpot, ve'im Shaddai ya'avis tzedek. A question, the first letter Hey of before the divine name. Could it be that El, God, Ya'avis mishpot, will he twist judgment? Will he corrupt judgment? Ve'im Shaddai, Ve'im, the second part of the question. If Shaddai, the eternal, another of the names of God, Ya'avis tzedek, could he corrupt righteousness? So these two sides of these two aspects of God's dealings with the word mishpat, which is the central column, tiferet, the beauty of his combining a gevurah, the severity of judgment, with chesed, kindness, to produce rachamim, produce compassion. That is that is the attribute of El, which is a name on the side of God's love. So God will not corrupt the mishpat, and Shaddai, which is the name associated with the attribute of Yesod, which is feeding to Malchut. Shaddai is sending down the Shefa, the flow of blessing of Tzedek, to Malchut, who is called Tzedakah. So would God corrupt the righteousness? Verse 4, Im bonecho chot'u loi, vayishalchim biyad pish'am. If your children sinned against him, well, he has sent them away in the hand of their sin. This is a point that Eliphaz had not made to Job, but now very forthrightly Bildad does make the point to Job that his children were not acting righteously by partying day after day in a succession of the houses of the brothers. And indeed, this is a point to bear in mind, that Job, for all of his righteousness, and although he sacrificed in order to atone for his children, it does not appear that he fully fulfilled his duties as a father to guide his sons in the ways of wisdom. At least some of the day they should have been studying the ways of wisdom instead of spending the whole day drinking and partying. So rightly, Bildad says to Job, look, you can't complain about the death of your children, because that was what was decreed to be. אם אתה תשחרר אל אל ואל שדי תסחנון, if you will entreat to God, the concept of teshacher is to continuously approach and pray to God every morning, as it were, to day by day, all the time. If you will appeal to God, ve'el Shaddai tischanon, if you will supplicate to Shaddai. So again, these two names, the name of El associated with Chesed, and the name of Shaddai associated with Yesod, because Chesed would be the source of the Shefa, and Yesod would bring the Shefa into the world. If you will do this, if you will now repent yourself for your sins, Bildad is telling Yov, Im zach v'yoshor oto, כי עתו יאיר הולכו, ושילם נבס צדקךו. For if you are pure and upright, then now shall he awaken upon you, arouse upon you his goodness. V'shilam, he will pay, nevas tzidkech, will pay the dwelling place of your righteousness. God will, if you are indeed virtuous and if you will turn to him in repentance, then he will repay your good deeds. And now Bildad is seeking to comfort Job in this predicament. V'hoyo reishisecho mitzor, v'acharisecho yiske me'od. If you will repent, then v'hoyo reishisecho, your beginning will have been mitzor, will have been small. V'acharisecho, but your latter end, yiske ma'od, it will be sagi in Aramaic, very much, it will be very abundant, very prosperous. Ki sha'alno l'dor rishon, v'chonein l'chikir avosam. For ask, please, back to the generation that was first, and prepare yourself l'chikir avoisam, for the investigation of their fathers. We are here in this question of suffering involved in matters that we ourselves have not sufficient experience, only from the narrow world, the time-bound world we find ourselves in. We need to go back to the ancient wisdom and look back at what has happened all through history. Ki smol anachnu v'lo nida, ki tzil yomenu ali oretz. Ki smol, for we are Tmol, as in the Hebrew of today, etmol, yesterday. We are just now, this day, we're born just yesterday. Ki tmol anachnu, we are just from yesterday. V'lo nida, we cannot know, we do not know. Ki tzil yomenu ali oretz. But a shadow is our days over the earth. Halohim yorucho yomru loch, umilibom yotziu milim. Shall not they teach you? They will say to you, and from their heart shall they bring forth words. So now Bildad will embark on a metaphor to express how ephemeral is the life of the wicked. So here is the teaching that is an ancient proverb, perhaps. Hayig'e gomeh belo bitzo, yiske ohu veli moyim. Hayig'e gomeh, shall the gomeh, the reed, as where Moses was put in the reeds, in the tevat gomeh, in the ark made of the little ark made of the gomeh. Hayig'e, will he be ge'eh? Will he be haughty and rise high? This plant below vitzon, without the mud and the clay in which it grows, the thick, well-watered mud. Yiske ochu veli moyim. Shall the rushes be abundant, the same word that we had just before of yiske, the ochu is the same word that we have in the dream of Pharaoh, where the cows are grazing in the ochu, grazing there in the pasture land. Can this be, can these rushes and these reeds, can these grow without water? There they are, they grow high, they grow mighty, but they're dependent on the water. Odenu ve'ibo lo yikotef. While it's still be'ibo in its full strength, lo yikotef, it cannot just be plucked down. These plants which grow in the clay like these rushes, they're actually in their full strength. They are quite tough to cut or to pull down. But v'lifnei chol chotzir yivosh, before all of the other grass of the fields do they dry up. The moment the water has gone, they dry. Kein ol chois kol shochechei el v'sikvas honif tuived. So are the paths of all those who forget God, and the hope of the flatterer, the one who merely serves God to his face but not in his heart, that person, toived, shall be lost. Just like the reeds and the rushes that were growing so haughtily and so abundantly, but when the water's gone, they dry up. So too, these those who forget God and those who fail to serve God in accordance with His in the proper way, they will perish. Asher yokot kislo uveis akovish mivtacho. That his trust, his hope shall be cut off, and merely the house of a spider's web, so easily brushed away, is miftacho, that which he trusted in. The futility and vanity of all that the wicked think that they're accomplishing, it's all nothing. Verse 15, Yisho'ain al beiso v'lo ya'amod, Yachazik bo v'lo yokum. He shall rest upon his house, and he will not stand. He will strengthen himself in it, but he shall not arise. Not only his physical house, but also his dynasty will be lost. Rotov hu lifnei shomesh ve'al ganoso yonakto seitzei. Continuing the metaphor of the reeds and the rushes, Rotov, he is damp and moist. Rotov hu, he's moist. Lifnei shomesh, standing before the sun. Ve'al ganoso, over his garden that surrounds him, Yonakato seitzei, the tubers, the roots that are sucking in the earth and the clay, they go forth all around. Al gal shoroshov yesubochu, beis avonim yechezeh. Upon the gal, the pile of the stones and the pebbles, shorosh of his roots are subochu, they become twined around in a complex way. Beis avonim, a house of stones, yechezeh, shall he see. This reed. And now comes the end of the reed, swallowed up, disappears. Im yevala'enu mimakomo, v'chehash bo lo re'isicho. Im yavar'enu memakomo, if he, that is to say the Almighty, shall swallow him up from his place. V'chihesh bo, the place will deny him. The place no longer acknowledges, does not recognize. Lo re'isicho, I never saw you. Hen hu mesos darko, ume'ofor acher yitzmochu. Thus is he that delight is his way, and from another earth shall they grow forth. Well, these last words of the verse here, this is the one who has the joyous way, he shall sprout forth from a different earth. Here we have a little crack in the cover over of the profound secrets that underlie our text here, because beneath the surface of this text is the mystery of Gilgul Neshamot, of the transmigration of souls. And here in this verse where it says, Henhu mesos darko, so it is he that joy is his way. Ume'ofor acher yitzmochu, they shall sprout forth from a different earth. Well, the earth from which the real plant in the of the nimshal, that to which the metaphor comes to point to, the individual, that is the neshama, the soul, and the afar, the earth, that is the body. So in the metaphor, the bulrushes and the reeds are terribly vain creations that are sprouting one day and flourishing, and then they dry up and they are gone. But here is the words of hope underlying this, that the earth, which is the body, me'afar acher, from a different earth shall they sprout forth. In other words, God is filled with compassion, and he is going to recycle these souls into the world until they are able to be rectified also. And so now Bildad comes to his conclusion. Hen el lo yim'as tom. Likewise, thus also God will not despise the tam, the person that is without a blemish, the person that is pure and sincere, goes with true, pure simplicity. V'lo yachazik biyad mere'im. But God will not hold by the hand of the evildoers. He will not despise the tam. This is Bildad's words of comfort to Job, that if you are indeed pure, what you must do is to repent and to rectify what you left undone, and then surely you will come to a good end. So now the conclusion of Bildad's address to Eov: Ad yemale schok picho usefosecho seru'o. Ad yemale schok picho, until there shall be filled with laughter your mouth, words reminiscent of Psalm 126 on that recited before the Birkat Mazon on Shabbat and festivals. Psalm 126, then with the redemption from the exile, our mouths were filled with laughter. Usefosecho teru'o, the words here of Eov, your lips will be with the triumphant teru'ah, blast of joy. Sone'echo yilbeshu voshes. Ve'ohel rishoim einenu. Those that hate you shall be garbed in shame, and the tent of the wicked is not, it is destroyed. So these closing words of Bildad to Eov are leaving him on a note of negativity. He had said to Job, look, if you repent, you will have a good end, you will laugh at the end, but and those that hate you will be clothed with shame, but the tent of the wicked will not be there. In other words, if you are not righteous, remember that is the fate of the wicked, so you should repent. That is his address to Job, and now it's up to you and me to consider how would we feel if we had that kind of address, if we were hurting very, very much. And if we were faced with somebody who is hurting very, very much and who we need to comfort, how would we do it? I think that's one of the challenges to the reader and the student of Eov in considering these discourses. So let us now conclude with the Perush of the Metzudat David, his summation of what Bildad Shuhi was saying to Eov. So in the comment of the Metzudat David at the end of chapter 8, he says what comes out from this address to Job is that the attitude of Bildad is like the attitude of Eliphaz, that everything comes through the providence of God. And he proves this from the destruction of the children of Job in their banqueting hall. For in the place of wickedness there is the judgment. And Bildad expresses his view that the good of the wicked is actually going to lead them to a very bad end, just like when the certain of the plants are very very moist and full of water, but on the other hand, the evil that occurs to the righteous will be considered to be a good thing for them, like the way that some plants are pulled up. Now we, through our limited consciousness and understanding, cannot expect to understand, but Bildad comforts Job by saying that in the end he will prosper. So with that, we conclude today's study of the Tanakh, and we'll be back with our studies of Mishnah in just a few minutes.
וגם נליזות יוי אלוהי וגם נליזות אחוי ושמחו אחוי ושמחו כי כבוד צבא אוי במשנה לכם אוי די די וקידיש רבו אוי דרוי מטעמים אוי אוי וריח נדיבו Bevias goyay bevias goyay lechayay oy lamabu
Shalom again, my dear friends, and now we, with the help of God, will resume our studies. And now we come to the Mishnah part of our studies, and just let me prepare so that we can also record this in MP3. We are studying today Mishnah Shabbat, chapters 3, the last Mishnah of the chapter 3, and we're going, with the help of God, into chapter 4. Shalom, today the 26th of Shabbat of the year 5777, corresponding to the 22nd of February of the year 2017. And today we continue with our study of Mishnah Shabbat, Le'ilui Nishmat Rabbi Chaim Yosef ben Rabbi Pinchas David, alav Shalom, who was a dear friend and a loyal follower of Azamra, and today for the elevation of his neshama, Menuchato Eden, may his rest be in the Garden of Eden, we study today's Mishnah. And we are on the last Mishnah of chapter 3 of Masachet Shabbos, Mishnah Vov, which turns aside from the earlier subjects of the chapter, which we're dealing with issues related to having our food kept hot for us on the Shabbat, given that you cannot put something onto a stove on the Shabbat. It looks as if you were starting cooking it. You can't reheat it. It has to be kept hot from the before the beginning of the Shabbat. But now we turn to a different subject, and we go back to the theme of the previous chapter, chapter 2, which was dealing with the lights of the Shabbat. And Mishnah Vov, Ein Noisnin Kli Tachas Aner Lekabel Bui Es Hashemen. One may not put a vessel underneath the lamp of the Shabbat in order to receive the oil. Ve'im noisno me'ba'ad yom muter. But if the person put it there while it was still day, that is to say on Friday afternoon before the sunset, then that is permitted. Ve'ein ne'oisin mimenu lefi she'einoi min amuchon. But one may not have benefit from it on the Shabbat because it is not something that is ready prepared. Here we see in the illustration a person ladling oil from the vessel of the containing the oil that had dripped from the lamp that was alight on the Shabbat. And we may ask, why may we not put a vessel under the lamp in order to receive the oil? If it was done on the Shabbat, why is it forbidden to do this on the Shabbat? The reason explained by our commentators is that the oil itself, as we see in the later part of the first section of the Mishnah, you may not have benefit from the oil anyway on the Shabbat because it is not ready. It is not ready alludes to an extensive subject in the laws of Shabbat, the laws of muktzeh. Muktzeh is something that is put out of your mind on the Shabbat as something that you may not touch. Besides the rules of the observance of Shabbat with regard to what we speak about and how we walk on the Shabbat and how we what we think about, whether we think about our business matters or not, we try to avoid it. All of these things relate to to our mouths, our words, our thoughts, and where our feet take us. But the subject of muktzah is where we may put our hands on the Shabbat. And the category of muktzah applies to several different areas of things which may not be touched or handled on the Shabbat for one reason or another. The essential concept of muktzah is one deriving from agriculture, where when people were drying their figs as they gathered in the figs over the summer from the fig trees, as the figs successively ripen, the figs would be, besides those consumed during the summer, the larger part of the fig produce will be put aside in an area where the figs are drying out, and the figs are as they begin to stew in their juices in the hot sun and start to dry, they are not an attractive proposition to eat. So this is something that people put out of mind during that part of the summer when the figs were being dried. And the muktzeh is something that is at the katzeh, it's put at the edge, at the end. It's way out of our thoughts on the on the Shabbat. That is the essential concept of muktzah, those things that we do not touch. For example, the tools of the trade, a person's tools with which they do malacha during the week, on the weekdays, forbidden malachot, are not to be handled on the Shabbat except in very specific circumstances. For example, if you needed, for some reason, a pitchfork to spear a little portion of food for a child to eat off, but to handle the pitchfork or the spade or other tools on the Shabbat is forbidden because of the prohibition of muktzah. The things that are to be kept out of mind are not to be touched. Another example would be precious items that are kept carefully from being handled regularly, like a precious vase or a precious a slaughterer's knife, which is kept aside from being handled on weekdays lest it will get a nick in it, and other things which are muktzah, which are kept aside because of chesron kis, because of the loss of the pocket. If the thing is handled, it will get damaged, and the thing that you'd put away on weekdays for its safety, you also don't handle and touch on the Shabbat. And now there is a category of muktzah which is called muktzah machmas mi'us. That which is mi'us, something which a person finds disgusting, that he avoids. And in this category comes the oil in the lamp. The oil in the lamp, and we will be coming to the concept of muktzah machmas mi'us when we come to the later part of this Mishnah. The lamp itself, in ancient times, those oil lamps were presumably soiled and with soot, and they were something that you would not want to touch unless you had to clean up the place. But you would not, and you would certainly not want to just take the oil to eat on with your food. It would be something that had been spoiled. And we will be coming to muktzah machmas mi'us in the later part of this Mishnah. For the moment, we're talking about the oil in the candle. The reason for its being muktzah is it was set aside for the mitzvah. The oil in the lamp was set aside on the Shabbat for the mitzvah of the ner, the lamp of Shabbat. And since it was set aside for that purpose, you cannot use it on the Shabbat. Now, after the Shabbat, it could be used. It's not forbidden forever. It's just because it was set aside for the mitzvah, and the mitzvah of kindling may not be performed on the Shabbat. Kindling and lighting a fire is forbidden. Therefore, the oil is muktzah. Now, if the person puts the keli, the vessel, under the lamp so that the oil will drip into the keli, the oil is muktzeh, and the oil resting on the keli would make the keli, the vessel, also muktzeh, because the keli, the vessel, has become the basis for something which is in itself intrinsically muktzeh. So when you allow the oil, which is muktzeh, which may not be touched on the Shabbos, to come into the keli, the vessel, it's as if you nailed the vessel onto the table or onto the floor because you can't move it. And what you there are doing is in a way destroying the keli, the vessel, on the Shabbat, because you are stopping it from its being moved around to serve its normal purpose. You can't move it from here on the Shabbos because the oil is muktzeh. So that is called mevatel kli mehechono. Mevatel, he is cancelling or negating the kli, the vessel, mehechano, from its what it's prepared for, what it's based upon, the purpose of the vessel, and that is the reason for this decree of the sages. A noisten kli tachzaner, you cannot put the vessel under the candle on Shabbos lekabel bos hashemen, to receive the oil. If the person put it there while it was still day, that is permitted. However, you cannot have benefit from that oil, nor could you move it on the Shabbos, even though the vessel had been left there from before the Shabbos. You cannot have benefit from it because the oil itself is not already prepared for use on Shabbat, because it is muktzeh, machmas mitzvah, it is muktzeh, not to be touched on the Shabbos because of, in this case, it's a mitzvah, the mitzvah of kindling the lamps on Shabbos. So now, having spoken about the oil, the issues to do with the oil, we now deal with issues relating to the lamp itself, the clay, the pottery lamp. It says, our Mishnah, metaltelin nir chodosh avol lo yoshon. We may carry about a lamp that is new, but not one that is old. As mentioned before, the earthenware lamps of antiquity, once they had been used and were old, they were soiled. So that is the category of muktzeh machmas mius, where the object, in this case the lamp, is muktzeh, not to be touched on account of mius. It is soiled and somewhat repugnant. So ner chadash does not mean a lamp that has been lighted for the first time. This is a lamp that has never yet been lighted. Rabbi Shimon Omer, kol haneros metaltalin chutz min hanir adoilek b'Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon takes a different approach. Rabbi Shimon says, kol haneros metaltalin, all of the lamps, they may carry them around, chutz min hanir adoilek b'Shabbos, except for the lamp which is a light on the Shabbos, namely the Shabbos lights or any other light that is a light on the Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon has a different attitude to the category of muktzeh machmas mius. Our Tana Kama here, in the continuation of Mishnah Vov, Mishnah 6, our Tana Kama is saying that you may not carry around an old lamp, even if it was not a light. The Tana Kama definitely agrees with Rabbi Shimon that if it's a light, you cannot carry the lighted candles around. The Rabbi Shimon does not have the category of muktzeh machmas mius. He does not hold that this is actually a prohibition. And that is why he says that all of the lamps, new or old, you could carry, with the exception of the lamp that is a light on the Shabbat. Well, now, in our time, when it comes to practical halacha, it is halacha until today that the Shabbat candles, the Shabbat lights, the Shabbat lamp, the candlesticks may not be moved from the place where they were on the eve of the Shabbat at the time of the lighting. Wherever the candles were lit, from that moment on, the candlesticks are muktzah. They may not be moved, and therefore one needs to choose the place of the lighting of the Shabbos candles with care. If there are those that practice having the candles on the Shabbat table on Friday night, a light on the same table where the people are eating, where the chalot are cut and the kiddush is made. And in that case, likewise, the table may not be moved over the course of the Shabbat, because the table has become a base for the muktzeh of the candles. And so the halacha is like the Tanakama, that even when the lamp is not alight, it is muktzeh on the Shabbat, once it's been lit. And now we come to a different issue, not related now to muktzeh, but now moving on to the question of the extinguishing of fire. In this case, extinguishing the fire of the little sparks that may jump out of the lamp, and the permissibility of putting a vessel with water to extinguish them as they fall from the lamp. So the last part of Mishnah Vov, Noisnin kli tachas haner lekabel nitzoitzois. They may put a vessel under the lamp in order to receive the sparks. V'lo yiten lesocho mayim mipnei shehu machaber. But they may not put into it water, because water will extinguish the sparks. In other words, if the sparks were bits of lighted soot were coming out of the Shabbos candles, and you wanted to protect the tablecloth or the surface of the table, then it would be permissible to put a vessel to catch the sparks under the lamp, not under the lamp literally, because you cannot move the lamp once it's been lit, but you could put it at the side of the lamp in a position where the sparks will fall into it. But you may not put water there, and the halacha is that water may not be put in even before the Shabbat to extinguish these sparks, and this is a gezerah, a decree of the sages, so that a person would not come to put water there on the Shabbat. That would cause the extinguishing of the sparks, and extinguishing of the sparks is forbidden under the same category as extinguishing a flame or a fire. We discussed that in the course of chapter 2, and we shall be returning to this question of whether and how one may prevent fire from spreading considerably later in the tractate. But for now, having completed Perek Gimel, the third chapter of Masechet Shabbos, we now come on to chapter 4, Perek Daled, Bameh Toimnin. With what may we cover over and insulate? We are talking now about the third of the three subjects that are essential adjuncts to the prohibition of cooking, bishul and afiyah. Bishul, cooking, and afiyah, baking, they are both considered to be one and the same malacha. And there are three adjuncts, two of which we've been discussing in detail in chapter 3. Hashhaya, the placing of a pot from before the Shabbos on the stove, only when the stove has been suitably treated with our modern blech, the cover over the fire and covering over the controls of the stove. Hashhaya, the conditions under which this may be done and how it is to be done. Hashhaya, to cause something to stay and remain. In Hebrew, shoheh, shoho, the root shin a hey is to stay, and hashaya is the noun from the hif'il form, to make something stay on the stove. That was the first. The second was hachzara, returning a pot onto the fire after it had been taken off to serve. Under what conditions may this be done? We now come to approach the third subject in this, which is the subject of hatmana, which is how can you insulate food that was taken to boiling point just before the Shabbat and has been removed from the stove, and we want to keep it hot. Under what circumstances may we do this? And the reason why here likewise the sages put certain gezerot, certain stringencies around how you may do this, is again for fear that if you had put your food insulated away, but you came there during the Shabbat and you found it got too cold, under certain circumstances you might have thought to heat it up again, which might lead the person to stoke the fire or kindle the fire. And for that reason, the regulations around hatmana, how you may insulate your food on Shabbat, are hedged around with a series of rules. So now our Mishnah, first Mishnah, deals with the substances with which one may cover over the pot of hot food. Bameh toimnin uvameh ein toimnin. With what substances may one bury away the pot, and with what may one not do so in preparation of the Shabbat? All this is to be done before the Shabbat, before the actual entry of the Shabbat. One has to already put in their covers the foods that we want to keep hot for the Shabbos by this method. Ein toimnin lo begefes, v'lo bezevel, v'lo b'melach, v'lo b'sid, v'lo b'chol, bein lachim, bein yeveshim. The following substances may not be used for the insulation of a hot pot on the Shabbat. Lo begefes, not with gefes, the waste of the olives after the oil has been pressed out. Lo bezevel, not with compost. These are organic remains of our fruits and vegetables that have been put aside as compost. Lo b'melach, not with salt. V'lo b'sid, not with lime. Lo b'chol, not with sand. Ben lachim, ben yeveshim, whether dry or moist. So what all these have in common, the gefes, the waste of the olives, the zevel, the manure, and the compost, the melach, the salt, and the lime, and the sand, what they have in common is that whether they're dry or whether they are moist, they are likely to increase the heat of the pot, which is being insulated with these substances around them. If you take, for example, the zevel, the compost, the manure, this is an organic substance that is in the process of breaking down. As it does so, great amounts of heat are released. The same with the gefes, with the olive waste, the same with the salt, the lime, the same with seed, the lime, and the same with the chol, the sand. All of these are going to do what is called mosif hevel. They're going to add moisture to, they're going to add smoke and steam to the food in the pot. And for that reason, it's forbidden even before the Shabbat to use these substances in order to insulate the pot, because the fear is that if the person finds that he's been allowed to insulate his foods with something which increases the steam in the pot, he might come to actually think that it's also permitted to heat it up on the Shabbat. If he found that the food had got cooled, he might think that he could heat it up in a way that would be forbidden. So now continuing with the first Mishnah, now we come to a series of substances which may be used for the insulation when they're dry, but not when they're moist. Loi beseven, not with hay or stalks of wheat and oats and so on. Lo vezagim, not with the kernels of the grapes after the grapes have been crushed and pressed for the wine, for the grape juice. The zogim are the bell-shaped kernels that are left. Beloi b'mochim, not with mochim. Mochim are any kind of wad of cotton wool or wool itself or any other substance that could be used for insulation purposes. Beloi b'asovim, not with herbs. Bisman shehein lachim, at a time when all of these mentioned are still moist. The stalks of the corn, the kernels of the grapes, the wads of wool, and the herbs. Avol, however, toimnin boen keshehein yeveshim, we may bury the food, insulate the food. The Hebrew word tomen is used also for the burial of a body. We are hiding it away. Litman, the essential meaning is to hide away. So we may insulate the food with these last mentioned substances when they are dry. And now we come to some more materials that may be used, continuation of Mishnah Aleph, toimnin bichesus uvaperois. We may insulate the pot with a garment of clothing, a thick coat, for example. Uvaperois, it could be actually with a perois, with fruits. Bekanfei yoino, with wings from of the feathers of the wings of the yonah, the pigeon. Uvenesoires shel choroshim, with the sawdust of the carpenters. Uveneoires shel pishton, with the waste of the pishtan flax. Dako, when it is fine. Rabbi Yehuda oim oiser bedako umatir begaso. Rabbi Yehuda forbids the use of the nesoires shel pishton, the waste after as the linen is, the flax is being combed. So he forbids this when it's very fine, but permits it when it is coarse. So now we come to the second Mishnah of chapter 4, which now deals with issues of when and how can we take away the cover of the substance we've used for insulating our pot, if in some cases the substance will actually be itself muktzeh because it has no use on the Shabbat. So continue now with the second Mishnah of Perek Daled, chapter 4. Toimnin bishlochin. One may cover over the part with shlochin, that is leathers that are in the process of being worked, have not been turned into garments or other vessels and utensils. They are just raw leathers. Umataltalin oison, it is permitted to carry them. They are not considered, these leathers, to be in the category of muktzeh. If you would use them to take your hot pot off the stove and insulate them in the leathers, they are not muktzeh on the Shabbos because they have another use also on the Shabbos. They're ready for use, for example, to sit on as a form of rug or a carpet. Now, begizet semer, when it comes to insulating your pot with the shearings of wool, that may be done. The Mishnah says, toimnin, we may cover over the pot, bishlochim, with the leathers which may be carried, but begizet semer, if it's with the shearings of the wool, then we are more circumscribed because the shearings of the wool cannot in their present state be used on the Shabbat. Ve'ein metaltin oison, we cannot carry them, they are muktzeh, we cannot move them. So if you can't move them directly, you can't pull them off the cover of the pot, how are you to get to the pot? How you get to the food? Keitzadu oiseh, how does he do it? What will he do? Noiteles hakisui, well, he takes the cover, Vehein and noiflois, the gizet semer, the shearings of wool will fall off. In other words, the cover of the pot is something which is available for use on the Shabbat. The wads of wool shearings are not, they are muktzeh. If he takes hold of the cover, he's only moving these wool shearings indirectly. So that is permitted. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, Kupo mato al tzido v'noitel. If it is a kupa, some kind of basket or box, mato al tzido, he should tip it on its side, v'noitel, and take it out, shemayitol ve'eno yochol lachazir, lest he will take it out and he will not be able to return it. V'chachomim omerim noitel u'machazir. But the other sages say that he may take it, and also put it back. So here we are talking about somebody who has used for insulation one of the substances which is muktzeh. And in this case, if he wants to get the food, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the pot is in a larger container which is insulated all around with, for example, the shearings of sheep which are muktzeh on the Shabbat. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah fears that if the person were permitted to take the pot out of the surrounding insulating materials, and they are very likely to collapse inwards, then we will not allow him to take the pot out for fear that he will want to put the pot back in and rearrange the materials, and they are muktzeh, and he may not do so. But the other sages say that he may take the pot out, and the pot is not absolutely bound to cause the surrounding insulating materials to cave in, and therefore he will be able to return the pot into the cavity out of which he took it. So now we come to the closing section of this relatively short chapter, Perek Dalet. Loi kisohu meba'ad yom lo yechasenu mishetechshoch. If the person did not cover the pot with the insulating materials while it was still day on Friday afternoon. Lo yechasenu mishetechshach, he may not cover it over from the time it gets dark. After the beginning of the Shabbat, because our sages have forbidden atmana after the Shabbat, even in those insulating materials that are not going to increase the heat of the pot. They're forbidden insulating the pot with materials even that will not increase its heat after the onset of the Shabbat. It is only permitted to insulate the pot with materials that will not increase its heat if that is done before the Shabbat. Lo yechasenu mishetechshach, he may not cover it over from the time it gets dark. Kiso v'nisgalo, but if the person had covered the pot in the proper way, but then for some reason it got exposed, mutter lachasoiso, it will be permitted to cover over the pot once again to return the insulating materials. So all this has been speaking so far about a pot of hot foods. Now, a much simpler kind of insulation is in the continuation, the closing portion of the Mishnah. Mamala is hakisoin, v'noisen letachas hakar, oi tachas hakeses. Mamala is hakisoin. A person may fill up a flask. V'noisen letachas hakar. He may put it under a pillow, Oi tachas hakeses, or under a mattress. And here he is simply taking a liquid that is hot, presumably water, and filling up the flagon, or he wants to keep it also under the insulation, perhaps in a very hot climate, to keep the liquids cool. And this is permitted on the Shabbat. And by the same token, it will be permitted on the Shabbat if you had a boiler of water and you fear that the light is going to go out under it and you won't have hot water. It will be permitted on the Shabbat to take a thermos flask, a flask insulated by a vacuum flask, and to use the vacuum flask to keep that water hot, or a soup or a sauce, because that is the same as the concept that we have in our Mishnah, that just as the person is permitted to fill the flagon with the liquid and put it under insulation, so when the person fills the vacuum flask, it's, as it were, the flask itself, the inner surface of the flask is the equivalent of the kiton, and it's on a cushion of a vacuum that prevents the heat from escaping, just like any other insulating material, and this is permitted to do on the Shabbat. However, hatmana, the keeping of food hot on the Shabbat in our time, has to be done with care. One thing that people do if they have a hot water pot on the stove or on a hot plate on the Shabbat, for one thing, food that had been cooked and was solid and has cooled down may not be put on top of the stove, but it may be put on top of the hot water pot, for example, in order to heat up. It may be put there on the Shabbat. Because it is not being put directly onto the stove itself, but only onto the pot, that is not considered to be like cooking, and in any case it's already been fully cooked. It has to be fully cooked. An example would be a potato kugel, or some other similar dish, a dry pashtida, some kind of flan that was something solid food. It could be portions of meat that you wanted to heat up. If they are solid, then it is permitted to heat them on the top of the pot that is standing on the stove. However, to cover over food that is being kept hot on the top of the pot on the stove may only be done if the food is not fully covered. If food is on top of the pot, even if, for example, on a large water pot that is directly on the stove, and one put a number of small pots or containers of food, even before the Shabbat, to cover them over on top entirely, for example, with some kind of a blanket or other insulating material, that is not permitted under the decrees of Hatmanah, of insulation of food, because in this case, what is keeping the food hot from underneath, namely the hot pot, is definitely Mosif Hevel, definitely adding the steam to the food itself. And when the food is fully covered, that is a case of Hatmanah, Bedover Amusif Hevel, insulating with something that adds to the steam, which we saw in the case of the refuse of the olives and the grape kernels and the other damp substances that increase the heat, the compost, and so on. We saw that that's forbidden even to do from before the Shabbat. However, if the pot on top, if the smaller pot on top of the water boiler were only partially covered, namely it's not covered on all sides, that is permitted. So with that, we conclude chapter 4 of Masechet Shabbat. And with the help of God, in our next session, we will be continuing with Sefer Iyov, and we're going into chapter 5 of our Holy Mishnah and entering a very fascinating section of the Mishnah, which will take us way back thousands of years to the actual day-to-day life of people in rural Eretz Yisrael, land of Israel, with their animals and with their various articles of clothing and their ornaments, and we shall be going into quite another world. So with that, my dear friends, we conclude our studies for today, and with the help of God, we'll be continuing with our studies tomorrow at the same time. So for now, shalom from Yerushalayim. Have a good day, a truly good day, and bless you. Blessings from the holy city of Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh.
menichu v'simchu, menichu v'simchu, ay ay ay, menichu v'simchu, menichu v'simchu, ay 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 elayim, menichu v'simchu, ay elayim, yavovoim shabusoim, yavovoim machudim, yoim shabusoim.